It's like
Yeah.
the biggest thing when I think about like menopause and like trauma is that the medical like world is not nearly as informed as it needs to be on how menopause affects women and
Hmm.
their symptomology and their like we're basically, I mean, not me because I'm younger, but my mama tells me all the time, and she has a lot of medical issues, that it's very frustrating because she'll be dismissed a lot. And heard that from a lot of my clients as well, feeling as if the doctors are minimizing the symptoms or making them feel crazy and I think it's just that's the biggest issue I see, which can be so re-traumatizing at that point of your life, especially if you've been like a very highly successful woman, you overcame a lot of things, and now you're having these issues and people are looking at you like you can't trust your own judgment.
Welcome to the Menopause Mindset Podcast, the place to get some answers and feel supported along this often bumpy journey. Many people sail through menopause, but many people don't. And so my guests and I are here to motivate you and inspire you so that you can make menopause a happier transition for yourself and for your loved ones. I'm Sally Garozzo, an award-winning clinical hypnotherapist, a menopause educator, and I can't wait to share my passion about wellness and how we navigate these changes and transitions. So come on then, let's dive in. So my guest today is Jamie Vollmoeller. Jamie is a clinical therapist living in recovery from PTSD. She's a group practice owner, mum of two with one on the way, and host of the podcast Good Enough with the Trauma Therapist. Jamie helps her clients shift their mindset, overcome their challenges, and begin living a life that brings them joy. She specializes in EMDR, which is short for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and is on a mission to help others feel good enough exactly as they are and break the chains of intergenerational trauma. So Jamie, a huge welcome to the podcast today. How are
Thank you
you?
so much for having me, Sally. I am doing great. I am
Oh,
like weirdly awake this morning. I think I was just excited to talk to you.
yeah, it's been in the diary for a while, hasn't it? So I'm super excited about talking to another therapist, actually. I'm not sure if and we have had a few therapists on the podcast, but not many. So why don't we start by getting to know each other? I'd love to hear from you about your kind of trauma story, like what got you into the world of therapy? Because all therapists have a trauma story, don't we?
Yeah, I think that's probably universally true. Or at least, the ones that are self-aware, the good ones,
The good ones, yeah.
acknowledge their trauma story. Otherwise, why would you get into this? It's just a crazy thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I get into intergenerational trauma a lot because my parents were also traumatized, as were my grandparents. So I anything I say about my parents or like what they did, it doesn't mean that they were bad parents. And I just want to clarify that for the listeners. It doesn't mean that they're bad parents. It doesn't mean that they didn't love me. It doesn't mean that I don't love them. And we honestly have a very good relationship now. But as a kid, my parents were young. They both had very traumatic childhoods themselves, so not very good models as parents. And I had sensory processing disorder,
Oh,
um, which for our listeners who don't know, sensory processing disorder, you have sensitivity to things like sound, light, textures, like feelings. Like, so a lot of kids that have that, the line in their socks, that was a big one for me, or the certain texture of things. So, and between, it's kind of like being on the autism spectrum just a little bit. And
yeah.
actually, I was diagnosed autistic as 2. Um,
Wow.
because which I might be highly functioning autism, but I'm not like a lower functioning autistic. But
Sure.
anywho, that was all causing a lot of behavioral issues. And my parents didn't have the education that I have. They did not know what to do. And unfortunately, back then, like the advice that they got really wasn't the best. Like it was very much like discipline your kid. And, she needs to be taught a lesson, essentially. I don't know, but
Like
I
sit
was
on the naughty step kind of thing.
yeah. So, I mean, from a very young age, I had Definite attachment issues with my parents. I was beaten as a child. I was locked in a garage in my room. And actually, like, they put a cat. This is actually kind of a funny story. Oh, maybe just trauma kids think it's funny because I can laugh at my own pain. But they got a cat net to go over the crib, not to keep the cat out, to keep me in. Um,
Wow.
and they would keep me, for hours just screaming. So, very poor nervous system regulation from a very, very young age. It did not get better. So by 8, I was in therapy. I was also, my parents got a divorce, which is probably a good thing. But there's a lot that came with that too. I was diagnosed with mental health issues. My dad's mother had a schizoaffective disorder. So he blamed the medication she was on for her psychotic episodes. And most of his childhood, she was in and out of the hospital. So when I was put on medication as a teenager, my dad, who I had a very good relationship with, all he would then talk to me about was, you shouldn't be on meds, you shouldn't be on meds, you shouldn't be on meds, which really damaged that attachment further. And then, and me and my mom never got along. We're like oil and water. If there's one person in the world that like I probably gave the most crap to, it was my mother. I was almost like a reactive attachment disorder kid. And I think that was because my behavior triggered her so much that then she was triggered. And really my mom's problem wasn't so much that she wasn't the one that was physically abusive or isolating me. That was my dad, actually. And I was closer to him. My mom could not stay calm while I was escalated. If I was
Okay.
escalated, she was escalated, and she could not bring herself down. So we would just stay in battle mode for hours, like my entire child, like into my teenage years. It just
Mm,
never, 20s actually,
mm.
never got better till I moved out. So I have a lot. And I was also bullied and told to kill myself, like million. I am one of those complex
Yeah.
PTSD cases.
Yeah. So it's not
Um,
PTSD, it's CPTSD, really, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's
Yeah.
really CPTSD. And I think that's why I became so passionate about wanting to be a therapist, because I wanted to help kids like me, because I went to many therapists before I found a good therapist.
Mm.
And it was like night and day what the difference between someone who like was super strength based and like helped you teach you what was in your control and was just unconditional positive regard is clearly not something I received a lot of as a child. So
Yeah.
having a therapist that was really like 100% on my side, like, and even, that didn't mean that she didn't call me out, because she called me out all the time,
Mm.
but she didn't villainize me or like make it out like I was being lazy, or because I also had ADHD. Like I had a lot of challenges as a kid. So I
Mm.
became a therapist. I wanted to help people. And then I got into EMDR, which was like the first time in my life that it wasn't playing whack-a-mole with my anxious thoughts anymore. Because it was like I did CBT with and talk therapy with my therapist, which was helpful.
Mm.
But it was like, I know these thoughts are illogical. And it was like whack-a-mole. Like I'd argue with a thought, push it down, and then another one would pop up, and then I'd argue. It was mentally exhausting to live my
Mhm.
life that way. And EMDR was the first treatment in my life where it was like, oh, it actually feels true in my body now. So all these thoughts aren't coming up all the time and driving me insane.
Yeah.
And that's how I got where I am. Sorry, that was a very long backstory.
No, I love it.
I
It's
didn't
really
even get into it all.
helpful. It's really helpful. And I love talking to therapists because there's no holes barred, is there? It's just like,
No.
we are just going to lay it all out for you because we're so used to talking so frankly, so openly, and just with a lot of acceptance for what we've been through. And it's kudos to you, really, that you can talk so openly and almost like laugh about the situation. It goes to show how much work you've done on yourself and how okay you are now to really talk about it. And that's wonderful. Um, as a therapist myself, my curiosity is going, what did you actually need as a child? Like, what would have been, so for all the parents listening whose children have got
And
ADHD and sensory
yeah,
processing, what would have been useful for you?
so I can tell you I have my son now. So what would have been useful to me is how I parent my kid.
Sure.
My son Michael also has sensory processing disorder. So, as his mama, it's funny, I have a lot of the same triggers as him. I just handle them better now, but I'm way more in tune to like when he freaks out because I'm like, oh, it's the like when we got the roof done, the noise on the roof, I was like, oh, that's the freak out. Okay, we're going to be out of the house for the next 3 days because this kid can't take it. But I am just more regulated. When I
Yeah.
became a mom, I did a lot of therapy, and not that my mom was in therapy most of my life. She really did try. I think that she just wasn't with the right therapist, and they didn't diagnose the underlying trauma because my mom had significant trauma. And I think, like most of us trauma kids, we compare our trauma and tell ourselves that we don't have any trauma. But so I went to therapy even more and really worked on my own like internal regulation so that when he cried, I could be his calm. And I
Yeah.
really, really try to be mindful of my tone, of my body language, of asking for help when I need it. And if no one's home, sometimes I will lock myself in the bathroom for 5 minutes and do a meditation and let him scream outside the bathroom and be like,
Hmm.
Mommy's going to the bathroom, just to
Yeah.
bring it in
Yeah.
because he needs me to be the calm. So for me, them helping me regulate and accepting that I had feelings would have been really validating.
Yeah.
And because we're both empaths to me and my son, so we feel
Mm.
everything very, very deeply. Like my son literally cried because he missed watering his apple seed that he planted in the backyard, and he was afraid that the tree was going to die because he didn't water it this morning, and started breaking down crying because it was an end of the world affair. And like that's
Mm.
how big emotions were for me as a kid.
Yeah.
And I just go, all right, baby, so we'll like, I don't minimize it. For him, that's an end of the world affair. It's not like I feed into it, but I'm like, all right, sweetheart, when we get home, we will water it, and I promise you it's going to be okay. Look, and I'll even like go on Google and show him. And
Yeah.
that helped me a lot too, and helps my son. Explaining the why. I got no a lot when I was a kid, but no why to the
Mm.
no. So, and I found with my son when I say, honey, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm worried you might hurt yourself or hurt your brother. And I just really love you and don't want to see you get hurt. So, can we not do it that way? Can we try a different way? He
Mm.
is 10 times more receptive to changing his behavior with them when I just go, Michael, no, or like
Yeah.
react that way. And that makes a lot of sense because we're, as adults, usually more receptive to doing what people want when they're nice to us.
Yeah. It's a
But most of the
no-brainer,
time, we
really,
don't
isn't
feel
it?
the need to talk to our children that way, or at least that's not how I was raised. So,
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And I think when it's just a hard no, the emotion has got nowhere to go because there's no rationale, there's no reason behind it. But when there's a reason, when you're giving a reason, the emotion can kind of, and when the emotion's acknowledged, the emotion has a place, there's a space for it to be held when alongside the mind kind of making sense of the why, then, and
it's
then it can
easier to
process.
shift, and it's
Yeah.
easier, like, because where does your mind go when someone's, I mean, I know for me, my mind goes to, oh, they're mad at me, or I did something wrong, or like this
Yeah.
is unjustified. And that just brings on more anger. And even when you say, like, honey, I really wish we could, but we can't because, and explain why,
Mm.
then at least you're softening that anger to maybe a disappointment. Maybe you'll still get a cry, but it's not going to be, an all out tantrum
Yeah.
because they're going to be more receptive. And
Yeah.
that's a big thing.
Yeah. Lovely. Can you explain what is EMDR?
So EMDR, like you said, was eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Mm-hmm.
Easiest way to explain, because I don't want to get too in the weeds for our listeners, because my friend Sharon tells me all the time, no one really cares about the like how it does it. They just want to know like what happens, right?
Yeah. Sure. I think so. Yeah.
um, so for our listeners who might not be as interested in the crazy stuff, like there's a lot of science behind it that shows that essentially when we have trauma, right, it's stored in our amygdala. So it's stored like right where we need it in our fight or flight, freeze, response center, so that we know what the danger is. And that's really smart of our brains. It's evolutionary to keep us safe. The problem is our brains code everything as trauma. So for example, if you had a really tragic incident that occurred on a day that it snowed, you might have flashbacks, nightmares, PTSD flare-ups every single time that it snows, which can be very debilitating if you live in New York. Uh, so, and I had a client like that because our brain is coding that snow as part of the threat,
Yeah.
right? So our whole nervous system has this response. So not only information in that thing that was a threat is coded for us to watch out for, but all these other things that are truly non-threats that make our systems more hypervigilant than we truly need to be. And what EMDR does is take that from the amygdala and moves it back into long-term storage. So it's not that you're never triggered. It's just when you are, it's not going to feel like you're reliving what happened to you. Like you can function. And I think that's a really important distinction that I like to make for, just the public in general. Because I think when people say EMDR, a lot of people are offering like an overnight quick fix. You'll never feel like you're going to feel amazing for the rest of your life. And I've done EMDR and I am so much more high functioning than I was. And I do manage better on a day-to-day basis. But that doesn't mean you're never going to have any triggers. I think if anyone's coming to therapy looking for that, or anyone in therapy or this world is promising that, then they're not really being honest with their clients because, Sally, as a therapist, that we have peaks and valleys and we can't afford avoid the struggles that we face in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So how many sessions would someone need? Is it like is it like a brief session alongside counseling or other types of therapy, or can you have like multiple sessions?
It depends on the person.
Yeah.
So what I will say is depends on the processing stage, right? To do a processing stage, you should be able to do, so processing, for those who don't know, is the part of EMDR where we're doing the bilateral stimulation. EMDR has 8 phases. That's the part of EMDR that's really like the gimmicky part that everyone talks about because that's what's different about it.
Okay.
So that stage, if you're working on a core belief or negative core belief of like, I'm responsible, let's say, or I'm not good enough, to finish out that target sequence plan, which a target sequence plan is basically a treatment plan that identifies all of the events in which you have felt like you are responsible or you are not good enough, and get all of those events down to no physical body disturbance. If you were just doing EMDR on a weekly basis, an hour a week, 12 sessions, right? That processing stage should be enough.
Yeah.
What I will say is most of us who need EMDR have more complex trauma. That's why we're paying a specialist to do EMDR.
Yeah.
And part of the therapeutic relationship is very much building rapport.
Yeah.
Part of like your biggest part of your treatment in EMDR really should be resourcing and making sure that you are prepared to regulate your own nervous system to go back to those really traumatic memories. Because practitioners, and this is also why, like, if you're seeing an EMDR clinician, please go through EMDRIA, which is EMDRIA.org, because they are the credentialing body of EMDR. And there are a lot of organizations out there now saying that people are fully certified after a 1-week class, which is insanity. Because EMDRIA is crazy hard to, like, there's different levels. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot of education. It's a lot of schooling. It is definitely not just taking one course and like that's the end of your EMDR journey. Yeah. And that's important because I've had people who've seen therapists who don't do any resourcing, and that could increase like processing stage. You will be reliving the worst things that ever happened in your life, right? So a lot of bad memories can come up.
Yeah.
And if you don't teach that client how to contain themselves at the end of the session, they're definitely like going to be way more likely for suicidal thoughts, self-harming behaviors, like whole host of high-risk behaviors. So there's that. You can also do intensives.
Okay.
So EMDR intensives, you can do like a 3-day intensives, you can do a 5-day intensive. It really depends on what you need. Or you can do it more like some people call it intensives, and instead of an hour session, they do like a 3-hour session once a week. To kind of expedite the healing process. Yeah. Now, to be clear, you should never be in processing bilateral stimulation stage, for that many hours at a time, because EMDR is more than just that stage. But I like intensives better
Okay.
personally,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it's hard to allow ourselves on a weekly basis to go to the deepest, darkest places in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done it with clients for sure, a lot of clients, and they've made significant progress. And I'm sure they do it over again. But it was like dragging them through hell for 3 months on end, and
Yeah.
that's rough on a week to week basis. Like I had a kiddo that was abused, and we had to do it over the summer. Like I strategically planned that for over the summer because I did not want it to bring them way out of their window of tolerance and affect school. And that's
Mm.
hard for an adult. It's hard to
Mm.
commit to something week after week when your symptoms are going up because you're reliving all of it and it's not through you yet. It's
Mm.
so much easier to just be like, I'm going to come in for 3 hours and at least we're going to bang out this target. So I don't have to feel this way for the rest of the week, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that does
hoping.
make sense. Yeah, it really does make sense. It's a little bit like what RTT is like. So I do rapid transformational therapy, which is done
Yep.
under hypnosis. It's not an eye movement thing, but it kind of rewires the belief systems. So yeah, and it's an intensive, like it's a 3 hour process. I wouldn't want to do more than that. But 3 hours and then someone goes away for a month and we keep in touch via WhatsApp or via Zoom calls. So there's still that touch time with the therapist. So you're not just walking out the door and left. So, but I do see the value in those slightly more intensive treatments. So you're not having to come back every week and take the sticking plaster off again. You can do it, get in, get out, and get on with your life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it honestly is so much easier, and even my weekly clients, even the clients that I have processed with, usually if it's like one of their first or worst trauma memories, they're gonna come back the next day, or they're gonna come back sooner than their
yeah.
um,
And their weekly
originally scheduled
appointment.
appointment, just to get them through the week faster because it's
Yeah,
it's a lot to come out. So if you're reliving this memory and every time you think of it you're at a 10 and then you go back there and yeah, it's just it's a lot.
it's a
It's a
lot.
lot to open up and not have closed for some
Yeah,
people.
absolutely. So you said a word a little while back that I'm not sure our listeners will understand, and we are going to get on to menopause and midlife in a minute, but I think this is a really interesting word, and that's resourcing.
Yeah.
Would you like to explain a little bit about what resourcing actually is?
So resourcing for us would probably be what other people call coping skills.
Mm-hmm.
But resourcing is a tool set that we have within EMDR. So there are certain resources that or coping skills that we teach our clients
Yeah.
that we also like reinforce with slower bilateral stimulation, which helps improve the neuroconnections in the brain to make those resources stronger and more likely to be automatic. So that's essentially what resourcing is. But we
Yeah.
just take that and then we have them do it in the real world and then they come back. And if they were successful doing it, then we also like reinforce that again with bilateral stimulation and reinforce that neural connection.
I
So it's
see.
a way of like basically reinforcing what they're doing outside of the therapy room and inside of the therapy room in their brain and making those neural connections stronger.
Yeah.
Super
Yeah.
cool.
That makes sense. So it's a coping strategy. Like some people will do affirmations because it makes them feel good, or some people might do
Yeah.
tapping, like emotional freedom technique. That's a resource. Or cuddling, that's a resource because it gives
So
you
for
oxytocin.
us, it's a lot of body based stuff. So
Yeah.
resourcing for us is usually, um, there's a lot of ways that we can do it, but it's usually taking them back to their body, to the feeling in their body, to their breath, um, creating a safe space in their mind, putting their things in a container. I've had people create a resource of like a strong protective figure that they can call upon when they're feeling neglected. I've had people
Yeah.
create like um, a protective, a nurturer, a spirit animal, like whatever's going to help them feel better. I had
Yeah.
actually one client, I don't know if you guys watch Parks and Rec, where you're from.
No, never heard
Oh,
of it.
well, it was a comedy show, with Leslie Knope was like the mayor, and she was like fiercely positive no matter what happened. Or she's not the mayor, she's like someone who's in city hall, it doesn't really matter, but she's fiercely positive no matter what at her job. And I had a client that was like, that's how I want to be when I'm searching for my new job, just like super confident no matter what I face. And she like installed this character as a resource, and she would like tap into herself like Leslie Knope before every interview, and she
Right.
actually started doing really great on her interviews because her anxiety went away.
There you
So
go.
resourcing can be anything. I just
Yeah.
thought that was a funnier example.
My inner role model is Lady Gaga.
Love that. Love
Yeah.
that, especially during Pride Month.
Yeah, it's great. She always gets me through. I have a few different ones, like Michelle Obama. I like her sense of calm presence, things like that. You know, if I have to do public speaking, I'll think of someone. If I've got to be pumped, I might think of Tony Robbins or someone like that. But I love it. You know, we can access because we learn through modelling, don't we? So
Yeah.
you know, if you have these role models and you observe their behavior, you can model it. And we have access to all of these behaviors on screens as well through our phones now. We don't have to be in person with them. So we can use that as modeling. It's really good.
I think that's really important, especially for a lot of CPTSD people,
Yeah.
because most of us didn't have very good modeling. So creating a model in your head of an ideal attachment figure is also something we do. And we do a lot of reparenting work on ourselves and learning self-compassion, because it's
Yeah.
just so important. And it's the thing I think that most of my clients struggle the most with, whether
Yeah.
no matter how they cope with it, like whatever their symptoms are, their biggest thing is that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Love that you've said that. So, Jamie, this podcast is about menopause. And people might be wondering why on earth we are talking about trauma, but I've actually been bringing the trauma conversation into the conversation about menopause because I don't think you can separate the two. I don't think you can separate women's issues
Yeah.
and trauma. I think they're highly correlated. And I think our trauma experiences deeply, deeply affect our hormones, our fertility. You know, we're seeing a lot more infertility in women these days. And I think it's kind of down to this sort of shutting down of our bodies, shutting down of like that mind-body connection, possibly in response to the way our needs have been disregarded by the medical profession,
You
by
were
the
so spot on. That is so
yeah,
what I was thinking. It's like
yeah,
the biggest thing when I think about like menopause and like trauma is that the medical like world is not nearly as informed as it needs to be on how menopause affects women and
mm-hmm.
their symptomology. And they're like, we're basically, I mean, not me because I'm younger, but my mama tells me all the time, and she has a lot of medical issues, that it's very frustrating because she'll be dismissed a lot. And I've heard that from a lot of my clients as well, feeling as if the doctors are minimizing the symptoms or making them feel crazy, or and I think it's just that's the biggest issue I see, which can be so re-traumatizing at that point of your life, especially if you've been like a very highly successful woman, you overcame a lot of things, and now you're having these issues and people are looking at you like you can't trust your own judgment.
Yeah, yeah. When you know you can, but when you've
Yeah.
got a doctor telling you you can't, or you know, kind of gaslighting you, then you do start to second guess yourself. Or if you don't, you get mad. It's
Hmm.
absolutely maddening and absolutely infuriating when you're going back to the doctor time and time again with various different symptoms and you're not being taken seriously.
Yeah.
It just really makes my blood boil. I go into fight mode, and I recently had an issue. I had oral thrush, And whilst it wasn't a menopausal symptom, it was kind of related to histamine, which is kind of related to hormones, and mast cell activation, which is actually a nervous system dysregulation issue. So it's kind of all linked. And I had to find that out through listening to podcasts and chatting to my wellness friends. But I couldn't get the medication that I needed. And it was such a bitty, broken down system. And I just went into fight mode and I saw red. It was just like a bull at a gate, and my heart was racing and my muscles were like, I could feel my muscles just like hypertrophy. I was ready to literally punch someone's lights out. It was bonkers. But this is like kind of what happens. And it's not your fault. I think we really need to reiterate this to women who are feeling so frustrated. It's not your fault. And your fight response is there for a reason, to help you get your needs met so that you can make that phone call. You can kind of like be a nuisance. And it wasn't until I actually walked into my GP surgery and literally broke down in tears that I actually got my needs met. They actually got me to see a GP right there and then. I was like, why does it have to be like this? Why can't you just notice me? And I think it plays into that original core wound that we have, like you were saying right at the very beginning. I'm not seen, I'm not heard. And it plays into that. And then we are getting re-triggered and re-triggered and re-triggered.
Well, and especially as women, right? Because there's also just like, as women throughout our lives, we have been socialized to be small. We have been socialized to not be too loud, to not make any noise, to not make any complaints, to be at everyone's beck and call. So on top of that, too, you have how the doctors are treating you. And then for a lot of women, like, it's affecting their ability to function at the levels that they used to function at.
Yeah.
And then they feel like they're letting people down, and I'm not doing a good enough job as a mother now, or an employee now, or whatever. And it just further like reinforces all of these things we've been told our entire lives to be. So it is infuriating. And I think the fighters, right? Because then you're a fighter like me, like you're faced with a conflict, you're like, boom, fight.
Yeah.
There's also those people out there that shut down.
Yes.
And I think, that's usually how it goes for a lot of women that are struggling with this. It's either we go into that fight mode or we go into shutdown mode, and just like, there's no point of even going to the doctor. No one even cares anyway. And we get really hopeless. And neither one is good. And honestly, they both make entire sense. But like, when we can take back our own control and be like, all right, I need to not feel this way in my body. That's what I'm really big about, so that I can properly advocate for myself, because sometimes yelling and screaming will work, but sometimes it's going to get you blacklisted from that office, right? Sometimes, so if we're in more regulated bodies, no matter what our issue is, it's going to make it easier for us to advocate for ourselves and to just feel better on a daily basis. Like, you leave the doctor's office and you feel empowered instead of feeling like you were just run over again.
Yeah.
Or, or you come armed to the teeth. Like, that's the change I see in my fighters when they do EMDR. It's like they don't stop fighting. They're just not as aggressive in their language and their body display. It's just like, no, here's mountains of research that I did to inform you, doctor, on what I need to do. Like that. Those are the kind of women I work with. Like, that's how they progress.
I love that. I love that. This episode is brought to you by my transformational trauma-informed coaching. TTIC offers you the opportunity to work with me over a longer-term basis to help you develop a more regulated nervous system, stop the cycle of burnout, and create a soul-aligned value system that puts you front and center of your life. Let me help you release physical, mental, and emotional symptoms of dysregulation so that you can have more energy and resilience to play with life. Let me help you dissolve outdated coping strategies like avoidance, criticizing, controlling, or people-pleasing so that you can have healthier relationships and apply more coherent coping strategies to triggers that occur in everyday life. Let me help you have a more beautiful, aligned relationship with yourself so that you can get your needs met and achieve your goals, whatever they may be. How do we do this together? We get change by applying beautiful, artful conversation and skillful questioning techniques to help you have those all-important light bulb moments. We get change by applying somatic practices and space-holding techniques to help you develop a safe relationship with your body so that you can start to process stuck trauma. We get change by using visualization and superconscious processes to help you bring your healthy future self forward and imprint your new reality into your existence today. The result is powerful. You are more resourceful, you are operating in alignment with what your inner being wants, you are making decisions from a place of coherence and empowerment rather than dissonance. You become more sensitive to your needs, while at the same time becoming more resilient. You stop performing and start behaving authentically. All parts of your psyche are unified and you feel whole again, able to operate and function socially with a safe feeling in your belly. To learn more about having transformational trauma-informed coaching, just go to sallygarozzo.com/transformational-coaching. This episode is brought to you by my Menopause Wellbeing Practitioner Diploma course. This online self-paced course is for you if you're in the wellbeing industry and you want to become a certified menopause wellbeing practitioner with this globally accredited and insurable diploma. Menopause is no longer a silent taboo as women are demanding more and more ways to get support during their transition. If you'd like to be part of their success story and earn money whilst doing so, this course is for you. The course covers what is a menopause coach, the hormone changes during menopause, what is estrogen dominance, why does stress matter so much in menopause, how are our organs affected by menopause, histamine intolerance, the 4 levels of healing through menopause, how we support our clients, how menopause impacts the wider world, and the business of menopause, including 2 case studies. In this course, you get 3.5 hours of on-demand video, written articles for every module, 11 modules, lifetime access, mobile access to tons of extra resources, badges for your website, a lovely certificate that you can hang proud, one-to-one support from me via WhatsApp or email, and your final assessment is done via an online quiz that you can retake as many times as you need to. So what are you waiting for? Become a menopause wellbeing practitioner today for just £127. Just visit sallygarozzo.com/meno to enroll. So do you work with menopausal women?
I don't specialize in menopausal women. I have worked with menopausal women.
Yeah, but you must have clients going through the menopause. I
work with women with trauma and all, that's every age range has trauma.
Right.
And specific traumas, they rather come to me for that than specifically menopause. But it all does play into effect because our mental health and our physical health are so related.
Yeah.
So it's really important that if you do have clients like that, you get educated.
Yeah.
And for me, a lot of my education was just really learning from my clients. If I ever work with someone that I don't specialize in that population, I'm very mindful of asking more questions so that I am not making anyone feel alienated or, not good about themselves.
Othered and things like that. Yeah. I mean, you can't know everything, can you? As a therapist, it's so broad. It's such a broad spectrum of people that you can work with. But like you say, I've learned the most from my clients, and every day is a school day when you're doing this job. It really, really is. Yeah. So how does stress impact our physiology? Yeah, I think that's what I want to ask.
How does
How,
like
how does,
in the moment or like over time? Because
yeah,
I
well,
can talk about
both.
both.
Yeah. Well, let's do over time, because I think it's that chronic stress that actually really impacts menopausal women.
Yeah, so chronic stress can cause complex CPTSD. That's
Mm,
it doesn't really it doesn't have to be you could have had no trauma and then hit menopause and this was a horrific experience for you and you had all these like compounded losses from doctors not understanding your situation and not being able to get the help you need. And that can lead, if that's over a long period of time, to PTSD like symptoms and, irritability. And it actually can lead to, changes in the hormones that are expressed in your brain, to the chemicals that are expressed in your brain, to and the longer you're in chronic stress. So before I was talking about neurons firing, right?
yeah.
The reason a lot of people with childhood PTSD and complex PTSD, continue to be re-triggered is because over time, these survival mechanisms that we had to use and the things that we've experienced put us on high alert, and we
Hmm.
keep replaying the same symptoms because those neurons keep firing together.
Yeah.
So when we're in a chronic stress situation, if we have the same behaviors over and over again, or the same experience over and over again, our automatic responses become much more automatic, right? So the
Yes.
longer it goes on, the more symptomatic we can become. And there's a lot of research that even shows that chronic stress can cause a lot of health issues. So it can
Yeah.
cause autoimmune disease. It can cause because it's taxing on your body.
Yeah.
And that's why mental health is so important to take
Yeah.
care of. And
Yeah.
it's just as important as physical health because if you have chronic stress, like if we think about just ACEs scores, right? So ACEs scores are adverse childhood experience symptoms, right? I
Yeah.
don't remember exactly. I think so. But ACEs was a study that was done on adverse childhood experiences. And they found that the higher your score was on that, the more likely you were to have diabetes, heart conditions, high blood pressure,
Yeah.
poor financial outcomes, like less likely to graduate college, like all of these negative outcomes just came from having
Mm.
chronic stress in early childhood. So,
It's
yeah,
bonkers, isn't it?
trauma has a very long-term effect on us,
Yeah.
which is why I'm very big into somatic-based modalities because I really feel like since trauma is stored in our bodies and our brains, we have to find a way to help rid that. If you think
Yeah.
about it, all other animals, like they shake after a traumatic experience. Like a
Yeah.
zebra, if it gets attacked by a lion, will literally shake to like re-regulate its nervous system. We
Hmm.
don't do that.
Hmm.
Like, we just store all our trauma inside. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's madness. And actually, I do think exercise is so regulating. I went to the gym this morning. Oh, yeah, she worked me really, really hard, actually, a bit too hard. And now I'm almost like I've gone the other way. I've gone really into the floppy parasympathetic, which I'm quite
Oh,
pleased about because I'm going to just flop on the sofa after this. But physical movement, the shaking,
yeah.
really, really good for regulating qigong, tai chi, yoga, whatever it is. There's trauma release exercise we can do, any kind of somatic movement, even sex is really great if, that's
Mm-hmm.
available to you. Really brilliant as a regulating somatic experience, really. So I think you're definitely talking my language there, Jamie.
Yeah. I mean, for my for the mimes or grandmas out there, I told my mom because my son, used to have very significant meltdowns. And my
Mm,
mom's still not as good as emotionally regulating as me, but she's a wonderful Mimi and she
yeah.
loves my baby.
Oh.
But when my son gets really upset, you can give him like fuzzies so that like rotate and on slow do the vibrations, and that actually helps him re-regulate. So
Wow.
we have those in the calm down corner box for him so that if he's really I have like a little coping skills box in the calm down corner so he can find things to help him regulate himself because calm downs are not about like punishment for me. It's just like you need to go take a break and regulate your nervous system.
Yeah.
um, and that was a really like helpful thing for some of the parents or the grandparents that I work with who watch
Wow.
their grandchildren a lot. I don't know how many of your listeners are like my mom, but Mimi has kids over her house like every day a week,
Mm,
so
mm,
multiple days a week.
mm. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, be good to know. I'm sure we've got an array. I think we've got non-mums, we've got mums, we've got grandmothers, we've got all sorts of people, even men listening to this podcast. So yeah, it's great. I love how we're just educating people and, guests like yourself. It's so lovely to have you on. The other thing that I use to regulate is our tuning forks. And
Mm-hmm.
because tuning forks emit a vibration, especially if you've got weighted ones, and you can put them on your body, various parts of your body, and then when they finish vibrating, you actually feel a sense of calm over
Yeah.
that part of the body. So if I've got like an accelerated heart rate or something, I will just pop a tuning fork on that. Or if my solar plexus is really active, so I've got butterflies in my tummy, I'll use it for that. Squeeze balls,
Yeah.
anything that you can kind of play with, or fidget toys are really good. Yeah,
Weighted
those
blanket.
a
Big,
weighted
big thing.
blanket. Yes.
Big thing we use.
Yeah,
We have
love it.
clients that are dysregulated. Sometimes it's helpful just for them to even take the weighted blanket, put it right on their lap, and
Yeah.
automatically feel like you're in a hug.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And just want to come back to something that you said before about CPTSD, which I thought was super interesting. Sometimes I feel that just going through menopause or being a woman in your midlife who is trying to build a business, for example, can be quite traumatizing, especially if you've, spent a lot of money on coaches, or you've spent a lot of money on systems to set your business up, and you
Yeah.
haven't had the return on the investment. That in itself, being self-employed can be hugely traumatizing. I know there's a lot of wellness practitioners that do listen to the podcast, and self-employed people that do listen to the podcast. And, if
Yeah.
you are feeling traumatized or stressed out by being self-employed, you are not alone. And it's
Oh.
so important to have these tools to learn regulation.
So I don't even know where to begin with that, girl, because you got into entrepreneurs, but yes, honestly, so trauma is anything that overwhelms our nervous system's ability to cope, right?
Yeah.
So it could be any of those things. I work with entrepreneurs a lot on imposter syndrome, and I found myself in being an entrepreneur because I own a practice in New York. I own a practice in Missouri, which for those of you not in the United States is like way over in the Midwest. I don't know how that happened, but it's it.
That's a
And then
lot.
I have kids, so I do a lot of things. But what I found is running the business, a lot of your relational styles and communication styles and issues with trust and attachment, and maybe some of the stuff from your childhood will come up when running a business. Like, if you're impulsive, like that'll come up. If you're afraid of taking risks, that'll come up and hurt you. Like there are so many ways
If you're
that
hyper independent, that will come up.
yes.
And you
My
take it
biggest
all
issue
on.
was delegating.
Mm,
My biggest issue was always like asking for help. And it got to the point that it was like, my girls were like, honey, you cannot be everything. You have to hand off some tasks because
yeah,
things are going to fall through the crack
yeah,
because you can't be good at everything. And that was the hardest part for me, was just learning how to ask for help and delegate, because it never felt safe to do that.
yeah.
So a lot of our stuff also comes up in these other areas. Like the issues that we have, we usually struggle with most of our lives, and some events are going to be more triggering for us and bring us back to that place.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Every relationship that we have is really, or how we deal with every relationship really is a mirror of our childhood attachments, those first attachments that we experienced when we were younger in our formative years. That's why they're so important, really, to get right. And you're doing a great job with your son and your kids. I'm sure they're really lucky to have you as their their mom, being so informed as you are. Actually,
But I'm
while
not perfect though.
no,
I want to say I'm not a perfect mom. Like I still yell. I hate that I'm pregnant right now because pregnant I am chronically in pain. I'm always high risk. I've been at the doctor like no less than every like 3 weeks throughout this pregnancy.
yeah,
And in the beginning it was a lot more. So I'm not, my best self like this. So I also just want to say for everyone out there, like just because I try like and I'm saying these things, it doesn't mean I'm a perfect mom all the time.
I
I
don't
also have
think there's,
PTSD. I'm gonna have triggers. The biggest thing
yeah,
is if you have those triggers, you just need to apologize and repair the relationship.
yeah, repair the rupture
That's
for sure. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And to caveat what I've said, there is no such thing as a perfect parent. There's no such
yeah.
thing as a perfect person, actually. So don't put pressure on yourself to get it right. And if you're listening to these podcasts thinking, oh God, I wish I was more like Jamie, like cut yourself some slack. You
I've
are
been in therapy
enough.
since I'm 8. You got a ways to go, girl.
Oh, brilliant. So let's talk about repairing, and let's
Mm,
talk about self-acceptance, self-love, and all of the good stuff. Um, we know that self-acceptance and self-love really is the route into self-healing. But
yeah.
what do you think are some of the common reasons why people struggle with learning to feel good enough as they are?
I think again, especially for women, I think we're so socialized to believe that our worth is dependent on the external validation from others.
Mm,
That it's just almost not even natural or ingrained in us anymore to just have self acceptance. We're very, very, very hard on ourselves.
yeah.
Um, and I can tell my grandma was such a Pollyanna. She used to accommodate everyone in the world. Um, and she's really sad now because it wasn't returned for her, but it was almost like she spends so much time trying to make everyone happy that she never really found what made her happy. And that's like the saddest thing to me, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the saddest thing because we just focus on all these other people. But I think I got a little off track. I'm sorry. I have pregnancy brain, which is kind of
That's all
like
right,
menopause
lovely.
brain. So
Yeah,
maybe you can help
of
me.
course. So we were talking about why people struggle learning to
Oh,
feel
with
good
self-acceptance.
enough, yeah, as they are. And actually, something that you said really resonated with me, that whole people pleasing coping strategy.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's a trauma response. It's a coping strategy. And so that really is a barrier to learning to love yourself, because if you're constantly giving and then waiting for the validation back, because that's why we do it in the first
Yeah.
place, really, to sort of get it mirrored back to us in some way so that we can see that we're worthy, because we don't
Yeah.
feel it, that's going to be a
And you set
block.
yourself up for disappointment, right?
Yeah,
And I feel that because, and I feel bad because my grandma was a people pleaser. My mother's a people, all the women in my family are people pleasers.
sure.
And, I'm the B word most of the time because I have better boundaries. And even me, I'm a horrible people pleaser. I have multiple family members living with us, got a mother daughter to accommodate my family. Family to me is above all else. But
Mm,
being a people pleaser is so core to of who we are, that I think it makes it really, really hard as like women to prioritize yourself. So what happens for me, and I'll speak for me, is I start to feel like when I became a new mom and just wanted to go out, I would feel guilty that, I'm not spending time with my kid. I would feel guilty going back to work. I would feel guilty for not working. I would feel guilty for everything because no matter what, if you do something and don't do something else, you let somebody down.
yeah.
And I was really like, probably right before I had a kid, I was still very much a people pleaser. I'd gained a lot in my recovery. That's the last part of me that I think I'm still working on, because that's the part that we receive the most validation for, right? That's the part of us that everyone loves. Everyone loves the people pleaser because
Yeah,
they make everyone happy and fix all the problems in the world.
yeah.
And we get a lot of backlash when we don't present as that person.
Mm,
And at least for me, I was always told I was selfish. I was, you know, yeah, I was literally, I've been told I'm selfish for saying like, yeah, no, I just want to hang out with my kids this weekend. Like, and that's not a selfish thing. That's, I'm prioritizing my happiness and their happiness over your happiness. And that's
Mm.
acceptable.
Yeah.
It might not be acceptable to you, but then maybe you don't need to be around me as much. Maybe that's why I don't want you around this weekend. I don't know. But
Exactly.
it's important. And I think that's one of the hardest ones for us to work on because it's so deeply ingrained in our
Yeah.
existence as female.
It's that intergenerational trauma, isn't it? It's just literally passed through. I think they call it the woman's wound. I've heard it expressed that way.
And I think it's even harder, right? Because I know for me and my mom, like my family loves me and they're very well meaning. But once you start setting boundaries, like if you had grown up with women who are also like that or men who are reinforcing that, right? And you start to act differently from that and put yourself first and say, no, I'm not gonna, not go to the gym this morning to again, like help you with this task because I need to prioritize my own self-care and regulate my own nervous system. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's valid. But when you do that, those people in your family, the ones that are close to you, the ones you care the most about, start pushing back on you that you're bad, yourself, and all of these things that you've been taught your whole life that you don't want to be.
Well, they go into
And
their
that's
own trauma spiral, don't they?
yeah.
Yeah,
And,
they
and,
get
and it
triggered.
just continues that pattern.
Mm.
It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. It's really hard finding that balance. And I think that's probably going to be the rest of my journey is trying to balance taking care of other people because I don't want to be selfish either. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm still a very selfless human. I can't just be ruinously selfless. Like I have to be a balance of
Yeah.
helping other people and taking care of myself.
Yeah.
Because everyone around me does better when I take care of me.
Yeah.
And logical brain knows this.
Yeah.
But default automatic response, Jamie, that's still a little traumatized from years of being socialized this way. My automatic response is usually, sure, I'll do that.
Yeah.
No problem. It's to the point that my operations director, now when my staff asks me for things, my automatic response is, I'm going to have to check with Emily. Because she knows I'm going to say yes. So it's always, I'm going to have to check with Emily and I'll get back to you. And then I go to Emily and it's not like she makes the decision, but we have a conversation and she goes, well, that's supposed to be a no, right? And I was like, I know, I just felt bad. So I'm just going to let you take the heat for that.
That's actually a good default response, I think. Yeah.
It's better than saying yes and letting people down, right? But, and that's part of it too, is that self-acceptance piece is like, I'm not going to look at that as a failure. I know it's a struggle for me. If that makes my day easier and makes it easier for me to not have that high level of anxiety and go into fight or flight mode, if I can make myself some scaffolds to where I need to be, that's progress.
Yeah. I like that. That's a really good strategy and a really good technique, actually. Just, the slow yes and the quick no. I've heard it described like that before, and there are multiple ways of saying no. You don't have to go no and be rude. You can say, let me get back to you, or just give me some time to think about it, or let me check with Emily, whatever it may be. So, yeah, I love that. That's a really
leadership team. It's a team decision.
Yeah, definitely. Just quickly before we finish, I want to talk about self-compassion. Because self-compassion, I really think we could do with more of, and I think it plays a huge role in how we heal ourselves. I think self-compassion is such a powerful tool, but many people don't know what it looks like. So what to you as a therapist, how do you teach self-compassion to others? How do you channel self-compassion for yourself?
So, easiest, well, one of the ways is talk to yourself like you're talking to a friend would be my most basic, how to practice self-compassion.
I love that.
I'd say that most of us are way kinder to pretty much everyone else than we are to our voices in our head.
Yeah.
Or the voices in our head are to us.
Yeah.
So there's that. I think becoming more aware of what those voices are is also helpful, like what your themes are. And I've even worked with my clients on coming up with goal thoughts, right? So even if they don't want to believe, like, let's say they have a feeling of like, I'm not good enough. And when that starts to come up and they start to say, oh, you're this and you're that, and that not good enough feeling comes up, it's, their goal thought is, I can start to accept myself, right? Like some goal thought to think of, which is a little bit kinder. It's not where we want to land, but just a little bit kinder. And it's just really about being kinder to yourself. We do a lot of reparenting work, I call it, kind of learning your different parts based off of like internal family systems. And so internal family systems is essentially like we all have different parts of who we are, kind of like dissociative identity disorder, but not so severe. But we all have different voices. You have that angry voice in your head that is very different than the excited voice in your head. And we have different parts of ourselves. Yeah. So what we do in therapy is work on reparenting those parts, because a lot of those parts, the behaviors that come out when those parts kind of pop out of us, whether that's impulsive behavior or being really aggressive or acting in ways in which our wise mind knows is not really appropriate, is usually because that part is trying to protect you. So we try to help our clients learn the why that these voices are doing this to them, or these parts are having these conversations. And even with the most critical parts of self, it's usually about protection or safety, or that they're afraid. Yeah. And a lot of it is about learning to just love and accept every part of who you are, the angry part of you, the sad part of you, the needy part of you, the happy part of you, the people-pleasing part of you. All of those parts need your love, because when we're pushing different parts of us aside, then we're really truly not accepting our whole selves. And those parts, again, play a role. So I give this example a lot of my teenage self is a very aggressive, hard boundaries. I used to call her, can we curse on this podcast? I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I used to call her zero fucks Jamie, zero fucks given. I was a teenager. I was done with everyone's bullshit. And zero fucks Jamie comes out. And in my adulthood, especially when running my business, I was very afraid when I would get angry and I wouldn't address things. And not because I didn't know it was a problem, but because I was their boss and I didn't want zero fucks Jamie to fly off the handle because I couldn't stay regulated enough.
Yeah.
And I did go back to therapy for that and learned how to regulate myself a lot more so that I didn't fly off the handle in these situations. Which I never did, but it's just that fear, because that part of self I had pushed down for so long, because I was like, well, she's the part of me that no one likes, but she's a part of me that's needed, because with zero fucks Jamie came out because people pleaser Jamie was people pleasing all day and it wasn't working and she was suicidal. So this one came out because she was like, listen, you still do this stuff, you're constantly going to be disappointed. Yeah. Eat your life. So that's why she's there. She's not bad. She might not have handled things the best way, but she's a part of self that is there to protect me. And I think we all have parts of ourselves that we really don't like, and that can prevent us from really feeling more integrated as a human and regulated and making available all the information that we have. Because every emotion, whether you like that emotion or not, like anxiety is a protective emotion. Yeah. You need to feel anxiety. You need to feel your anger. Yeah. You need to feel things so that they can alert you to what's going on around you and you can appropriately address them. Yeah. But if we're constantly pushing negative feelings down, then we're ignoring until we're in a crisis situation, and then you're going to have a really negative response that is not your true self.
Yes.
So that's the importance of self-acceptance.
Yes, I love that.
How we do it.
Yeah, I love that. It's so important. It's that integration, isn't it? It's bringing all parts back to the whole so that we can operate from that place of core centeredness and almost bring different parts out in different circumstances. You know, I have a part of me that when I'm engaging in therapeutic practice with someone, I'm holding space, I'm honoring, I'm releasing my agenda, I'm tapped into my intuition, and I'm very much, you know, coming from a place of heart. Now, I can't behave like that with, you know, perhaps one of my tenants who's not paid the rent or not paid something.
Yeah.
If I have an airy fairy conversation with them, they'll just laugh at me and you know, nothing will get done. I need to assert myself in those situations and let fight Sally come out, as you say, not to the degree where I'm being a nasty bitch, but just to the degree where I'm like, you know, talking a little bit more pragmatically and logically and a bit more
Assertively.
weighty. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like this is a hard boundary and it's a no. Like,
Hmm.
and saying that with confidence is a hard step for a lot of people.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah. And I'm an only child, you know, and I've got no choice. There's no one coming to save me. I've got no siblings. It's all on me. And I've got no children. So it's all on me. So I've had to really develop a huge amount of psychological flexibility, regulation, resilience, and all
Yeah.
of that. My self-care practices are like, you know, high, high, high. Without
I
them,
hope to be you one day, darling. That's what I'm still working on, making that a consistent thing. They're there, and
yeah,
then life gets stressful and something happens with the kids and they fall off. And I'm like, damn it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I try and make them a priority. Yeah, it's just so important. So, look, I've really loved talking to you, Jamie, about therapy and about EMDR, and about, you know, how you approach your practice, how you approach your own self care, motherhood, and we've touched on menopause a little bit. I do think it's so important for people to know that actually, as we go through menopause, we do need to double down on our resources, whether
Yeah.
that's personal resources or get the help that we need. And Jamie, you are out there as a therapist for people going through menopause if they have experienced trauma because of menopause or trauma because of childhood trauma. You know,
Yeah.
ACEs do affect menopause symptoms. We know that now. It's not just a thing that we used to posit. There's some scientific evidence behind it now.
Yeah.
So we exist for people. Get the help that you need. Jamie, are you active on social media or is it just through your website? Where can people find out about you?
So on TikTok, we are GE Trauma Therapist, like good
Hmm.
enough trauma therapist, GE
Okay.
Trauma Therapist. I'm trying to get up to 1,000 followers, guys, so I can do my podcast live. So if you guys could follow me there, I'd appreciate it.
Wow. Okay.
You can also follow our podcast, Good Enough with the Trauma Therapist. And for now, that's about it. If you
Yeah.
go to the other ones, you'll find all of our websites and our
Yeah.
all that jazz, so that you can follow the everything. But I have two different businesses in two different states, so it gets a little hard. There's different handles depending on what state I'm
Yeah.
in.
Do you work remotely with people?
I do. I do work remotely. We do virtual work. I have counselors that are licensed in New York State, Missouri, Kansas, North Carolina.
Hmm.
We have a couple different states. The states are a little harder. You can't work with everyone across the United States. It's just
Okay.
weird.
Yeah.
But we also do intensives. So we partner with that we were talking about earlier. We partner with like local Airbnbs and really beautiful places to stay. My practice is on Long Island, which is the island right off of New York City, like the Hamptons, Montauk, all that jazz.
That sounds
Uh,
gorgeous. I'm going to New
it
York
is. It's
actually.
really pretty. So
Yeah.
we partner with places so that people can have a nice place to stay. And we
Lovely.
come to you and do your intensive therapy with you. And that gives you like a nice, relaxing vacation where you can truly focus on you and doing this deeper work.
Beautiful. That sounds exquisite. Brilliant. What a
That's
wonderful
our
way
New
to do
York
therapy.
campus. If you're interested in that, that's you can check that out at www.liemdr.com.
Perfect. Well, look, thank you so much, Jamie, for spending this moment in time with me and our listeners. And I'll put all of your links in the show notes. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you, Sally. It's been a pleasure. Have a good one.
So I'd love to know what your biggest takeaways were. Be sure to leave a comment below and subscribe, like and share. Just so you know, not all podcasts are uploaded here, so if you want the full array of episodes, head on over to Spotify or Apple and search The Menopause Mindset. You also might like to come and find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn or TikTok. Just search at Sally Garozzo Mind Mentor. All right, folks, thank you so much for your support and attention. It means the world. Have a great week and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.